to the response that will always struggle to have a longer term impact. So, can you share with us what you see as the opportunities that we have learned from the COVID response, in order to better link humanitarian and development financing? I think somebody called it connecting the dots from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom. And in particular, what you see as the role of that coordination. So, Yasmine, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all colleagues. I'm calling in from Beirut, where we are just here on mission to develop an additional response that actually integrates humanitarian development activities to create that coherence. Up to now, our responses in Education Cannot Wait to Lebanon, as in many other countries, has been largely focused on the immediate emergency response. And now we feel the time is ripe to actually move on a more multi-year humanitarian development response. Lebanon is a good example because it's the biggest has the biggest capita of refugee hosting countries in the world, and they've also gone through many challenges with the Beirut blast lately, on top, of course, also having COVID. But what I would like to say applies to so many other crisis countries. And I also would like to thank my dear friends and colleagues, Brigitte, Manuel, Benjamin, for recognizing the support that Education Cannot Wait provides in this regard. As you all know, Education Cannot Wait is just a catalyst. The real work on the ground is done by Save the Children, by UNICEF, by the different civil society organizations and UN agencies in close partnership with the host governments. So we are a catalyst. We're trying to raise resources around education and increase those. And in doing so, our objective is to also advance the Secretary General's reform program, which encompasses all of us in the larger UN family, not just UN agencies, but also our NGOs and civil society and all UN member states and private sector. And that's where it was first mentioned, the new way of working and to promote humanitarian development coherence, because we reached the point, it's not enough to just deliver humanitarian immediate impact when you have a crisis, but you also need to plan for long-term and system changes and also try to get the public services to function, which is often very difficult in a crisis country because governments are often unable or unwilling. Since we are now in the Global Education Cluster meeting, I think it's important also to acknowledge the role of the cluster system. And for Education Cannot Wait, when we became operational in 2017, we immediately looked to the cluster to be that coordination mechanism for all Education Cannot Wait investments. One thing we decided immediately, we are not going to create a separate or parallel coordination mechanism. There exists a system-wide system that came out of the humanitarian reform, and that is the cluster. And then, of course, when we have situations of refugees, we tend also to give a stronger coordination role to the UNHCR. But speaking about the cluster has an enormous potential if we just give them the capacity to actually bring together both humanitarian actors and development actors. And the humanitarian development nexus is not an abstract idea. It really means that when we develop a program, we make sure it's multi-year, because that's the development side of it. But we also make sure that both humanitarian actors and development actors are around the table when we conduct assessments, when we assign complementary responsibilities. These are joint programs, it's not just one actor, and doing the implementation. So in reality, it looks like you have UNICEF or Save the Children or Plan or NRC. They may respond to the immediate influx of or movement of internal displays because of a crisis. But then you have other actors like UNESCO that may have a stronger advantage on system building, or WFP that has a very strong advantage on school feeding. And then if you bring everyone together in one program, doing the same assessment, you're creating joint programs and you're creating coordination by the virtue of that joint program. And the cluster plays an extremely important role that I believe we haven't until recently maximized. That is really the role. And I think we also need them, give them the capacity to do so. And the same applies for UNHCR on refugee education. And when it comes to education, if you look at collective outcomes, all of us working together towards the same goal, you will significantly strengthen the actual learning outcomes. Because the more we are together, the more we can address the holistic, the whole of child approach in education, where everyone comes in with their added value. So collective outcomes always leads to learning outcomes or state greater chances. So I think we have a system. W works through it, and I think we always all need to strengthen and give capacity to our colleagues who are doing a brilliant job both at the global level with the global education cluster, and also the work that is managed by UNICEF and Save the Children in country. And I would only appeal, see this role as a coordinator, as the one that facilitates inclusion. Coordination is really an art in itself. It's not like I happen to be in a good position, I grab it for myself. It's really how much you can contribute to the larger good, and recognize the added value in all your colleagues and different agencies and NGOs, and always stay focused on the children and adolescents. I think we can do so much more. Just getting rid of those territorial sort of agency belongings, and just say we as one large family, whether we are civil society, NGOs, and even host governments. And we have a massive challenge ahead. We have over 75 million children because of COVID-19 in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Lebanon, as refugees, as internally displaced, in Afghanistan. They just need us to be totally unselfish, totally separated from agency belonging, and just work together and just give it all. And I've seen it. It's possible. I see it all the time. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues who are part of this jointness. And finally, education cannot wait. We are just there to raise the resources. We are so small in headquarters. We take very little overhead. We are raising it for you because you are the ones doing the job on the ground. And thanks to the cluster and UNHCR, we are able to do it in a coordinated fashion. That's all I think I had to say. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks very much for that, Yasmine. So much that I could pick up to highlight, but I'm going to try and be super brief because we're running a little bit behind schedule, and I want to make sure we have time for discussion at the end. But there were a couple of things that you said that I just can't pass up from commenting on. One, I really liked your point that the Secretary General's reform isn't just for the UN. I think that's an interesting perspective, with a number of points linked to that you shared with us, including the need to kind of think about how we can mobilize and support the public sector to perform. I thought that was quite interesting. And then you spent quite a bit of time talking about the value and the potential of the cluster system itself as a really critical model. I'm not going to repeat all the excellent points that you made, but essentially you also called out a number of specific key partners that play a role in all of that. And then you concluded by saying, look, education will, when we come together, contribute to strengthening learning outcomes. And of course, for those of us in the education sector, That's why we're here. That's what we do. So it was really great to hear you say that. And then your final conclusion that let's focus on children, not on turf. I think those were really wise words for conclusion. So thank you very much for that. And now I want to move on to our final panelist, which is Dr. Valentina Baltag. Valentina, multi-sectoral interventions, as we know, and as we've heard in this discussion already, are more important than ever. In particular, health and education sectors need to strengthen their collaboration in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing a lot emerging in this regard, and I'd like to invite you to share with us your view on how we can improve intersectoral collaboration further. As you heard me say in my discussion with Manuel in his presentation, easier said than done.
Thank you, Chris. No, indeed, at no time in recent history has the vital role of school systems for learners' health and well-being been so sharply in focus. And that's a sad, out of a sad situation, health and well-being is in such a sharp focus in education sector. But even before COVID-19, education was widely accepted to be one of the key social determinants of health, while good health was known to be linked to greater educational attainment. Not only educational attainment, but also longer-term results such as employment and